This is the walkthrough video for PCTC 2023, round 1, question 8, senior. Question 8, letter swaps. So here we're given an input word, and we essentially just want to go through 3 swaps, and we want to swap the letter at those indices around together, and then print off our final word. Now, one thing to note is that in the first sentence of this problem, it says we're given 2 letter positions, which is good, but it's from 1 to the number of letters in the word. So it's not 0 indexed, which is what Python likes it. And so we should just bear that in mind. And you may have had this issue if you try this problem yourself. Anyway, so let's dive straight in. So let's take in our word as our first input. And now what I'm going to do is because we essentially want to do the exact same thing 3 times in a row, right? Like we want to take in an input, we want to process the input and swap 2 letters around. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just put all of the rest of my code in a for loop. And we're going to run this for loop 3 times. So we're going to input the instruction, then we're going to swap the letters, and then we're going to repeat this whole for loop again. And so essentially, as we take in our inputs, we're processing them. We're not taking in all 3 inputs and then processing them afterwards. We're processing them as we get them. And this just leads to simpler code because we don't have to bother storing our inputs. We just take it, use it, and move on. And so let's take in our input. So we're going to call it instruction. And at this point, we now need to process it. So let's take, we need to pass it. So we need to extract the numbers, which is 1 and 3 in this case, or 2 and 7, and so on. But we should also bear in mind the constraints down here. It says the input word will be maximum 20 characters. So the index might not necessarily be a single digit. And that means we can't just do basic string slicing on it. And so what we can do instead, because we can split on the comma. And if you split on the comma, everything before the comma is 1 index, everything after the comma is another index. And it's called those 2 indexes, A and B. So index A and index B, they're going to be equal to the instruction split at the comma. But also we want to, of course, turn them into an integer. So let's just turn A into an integer there and B into an integer here. And now we can get to the actual swapping bit. So, well, before we do that, actually, let's turn word into a list because we can't just change things at a certain index in a string in Python, but we can do that in a list. Like we can change what's at index 3 in a list, but we can't change what's in index 3 in a string easily. So let's keep it as a list. And so let's swap them. So let's do word A is going to be equal to word B, and then word B is going to be equal to word A. But if you're keen-eyed, you might have spotted the problem already, which is that we change word A to word B, and then we change word B to word A, but we've just changed word A to word B, which means this code down here is effectively like saying word B is equal to word B, because we've just changed word A to word B. And so this line 10 does not do anything. Line 10 does not swap B to A. I mean, line 9 works as intended, but line 10 does not. And so what you'd have to do is, for example, is to create an extra variable that stores what the original value of A was, and then this would be your original value of A. And this is just a bit cumbersome. I mean, it works fine. It's only 1 extra line of code, and 1 extra variable. But why do that when you can do this other cool thing, which you may not have? I mean, we've already used it. We've already used this idea in our program already, but you may not have realized what the real benefit of this syntax is. And this is really cool. Like the first time you hear about this technique, you're kind of mind blown because it just saves so many it's the type of thing that occurs so often that it's really helpful. And it's just awesome. So when we want to swap 2 variables in Python or 2 things in Python, if we swap them on the same line, it works. So Python almost hasn't updated your first variable by the time you swapped it on that same line. And what I mean by that is if I do word A, word B is equal to word B, word A, then I've set word A to be equal to word B and word B to equal to word A. And even though we've just done what we've just done like 5 seconds earlier, the fact that we've done it on one line means that Python hasn't yet updated word A by the time we set word B to word A, which means if you ever want to swap 2 things in Python, 2 variables, 2 whatever, you should always do it like this. You want to swap them both on the same line because that way it's going to work without you having to create that extra third placeholder variable. And I mean, we use this idea up here, so hopefully you're already familiar with this idea of assigning multiple variables on one line. And that's pretty much all we need to do, right? We've swapped our letters, and therefore this entire code we can just repeat it 3 times in our for loop for each of our 3 inputs. And once we've done that, we can then just print off our final word. But word is a list, and so we want to print off the actual word itself. And to do that, we can join it with nothing in here, so there's no delimiter. And hopefully we do get the 5 out of 5. Well, not evaluate. Oh no, that's going to be some random issue. Some live debugging. Hopefully I can do this pretty quickly. Oh yes, yes, yes. You know, so this is kind of dumb. So at the start of this video, I said we have to be careful of the fact that the letter positions are given in human indexes and not in Python indexes, and that we should probably zero index them. And so let's just zero index them here. And therefore it won't throw the error. Because you can imagine if you're referencing the last index of a letter, then it's going to be the human index and not the Python index, and that doesn't exist in Python. And so it's going to get really confused, and it's going to error out. And so now it gets a 5 out of 5. Always be careful with those indices.